I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. Thaddeus McCotter, my colleague and co-host, is in Detroit, WJR. Thaddeus, we're going to do politics here, and it's February, and the President's State of the Union message is behind us, and Congress is looking for a policy debate these next weeks. But my measure, Thaddeus, is that the Affordable Care Act remains the story that no one has to much mention, that it's on everyone's mind. When you're in Congress and you know that there's a problem you can't solve, for example, Iraq in 2006 before that midterm, or 2007 before the presidential election of 2008. Do people talk about it obsessively, or do they go their way and do their business and not worry about the big problem?
Well, they talk about it amongst themselves, obviously. But when you start talking, John, about going into the public square and talking about it, they would do everything they could to avoid it. You would have the leadership tell you that we're going to have a difficult time with Iraq in the 2006 elections. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the economy. Right. Of course, being from Detroit, that wasn't much of an option at that point in time.
So everyone was aware that you weren't talking about the problem. You weren't solving it. I recall anecdotes, Mr. McCotter, where the leadership in the House was sort of living on the Nile, you know, that river, Denial, and that you could all see it coming at you, but you weren't allowed to say it in public. Even in the conference, you weren't allowed to say, we're going to get whipped.
Well, it's not whether you're allowed to say it. And in fact, in 2006, the Republicans we were showing a bit of a comeback towards the end, and then you had the Foley scandal finish that off.
Right.
And they never recovered by the time 2008 rolled around and the Obama steamroller hit us. But when you look at it, John, one of the things, ironically, in hindsight, that they were talking about as a messaging point in the alternative to Iraq was housing prices. And we know what that housing bubble turned into, and eventually it turned into the Wall Street bailout.
Right. You had it. It was just early. Timing. Lara Brown of George Washington University joins. Lara and Francis Rose of Federal News Radio. Lara, you observe in your blog that both parties are acting fragile. They're both tiptoeing around. They're both avoiding the spaceship that's floating over Washington. Why are they doing that?
Well, I think what's happened is that both parties sort of scared themselves last fall. You had essentially the, shutdown argument, and the Republicans got in trouble with the American public for that. Then you had the rollout of Obamacare, and that really brought down both the president and the Democrats. And what you saw by December was essentially the fact that most Americans at this point in time are now saying that they don't even want to identify with a political party. We have 42% of Americans who are right now saying that they consider themselves independent. And that's a very large number. And I think what you've seen is that at the end of the day, neither side has trust. And when you don't have trust, what you have to do is take small steps to try to rebuild it. And that's what the parties are trying to do. It's what they did in the December budget deal. And it's the way both of the State of the Union and the response speech actually came off.
Thaddeus, do you think collectively both sides can discipline themselves, or this is just something that came to them all in the middle of the night and nobody had to pass a memo around to say, cool it?
Well, I think that they both came to the realization that they were falling out of public favor. Webster's is going to add independent as a synonym for disgusted, it seems, these days when people look at Washington. But the problem that they're all going to have now is the American people still want practical results, and they're going to have to engage each other to do that. For the Democrats, the current keep the lights on strategy might not be a bad idea, and the alternative to the Republicans actually mounting an aggressive policy agenda or an aggressive argument with them. On the Republican side, I think they're very afraid that the hangover in their own caucus and within the party ranks itself over trying to shut down the government is going to prohibit them from any bold moves.
Right. There is a problem with the Republicans. It's called immigration. But let's deal with the Affordable Care Act first. Francis, good evening to you. You're reporting today that there's a problem in the healthcare.gov we didn't even know existed, Francis, when we couldn't get on the website. And then people got on the website and they gave us all these enrollment numbers and we still didn't even know it existed. What is the problem with the appeal appeals process. What is that, Francis?
Well, the appeals process, John, good evening, by the way, to Thaddeus and Lara as well. The appeals process is the process by which you are supposed to be able to say, wait a minute, the decision that was rendered about me vis-a-vis the Affordable Care Act, do I get a subsidy or any of these other issues, that appeals process is supposed to be something that you can say, I would like some recourse, I would like to have my case reexamined. And we learned today that about 22,000 people have filed those kinds of appeals. The federal government, according to the Washington Post at least, isn't able to do anything with those appeals. They have them sitting there, they're stored on a computer, but there's no process in place for them to be able to deal with those. These are all kinds of issues. These are people who said where the healthcare.gov gave them back the result, you don't qualify. These are cases where they were put into the wrong insurance program, or they were cases where they thought the marketplace charged them too much. They qualified for a subsidy, but the marketplace didn't reflect that, and they had to pay full freight to get into their health care plan. And so these are people who are sitting there waiting for help, and there's no way for the government to do anything about them, John.
Thaddeus, you're a recovering politician, so I understand that you're steeled for failure. But does this surprise you that HHS, CMS, having failed everywhere else, didn't think through that there might be disputes that are part of the problem of getting health care in America?
I think they may have thought of it, but I think the press to get the website up and running, to get the program implemented, especially because, as you know, the Democrats were very concerned that this would linger as an issue without providing any practical, in their mind, benefit to the American people. They always wanted, once this was in place, to start to change people's minds about it. So I think that in the rush to try to accomplish that, which clearly is not happening, they might have cut some corners, or they might simply have just not had time to implement that.
This is about healthcare.gov, right? Right, Francis? Just about the federal site.
Yeah, I'm not hearing Thaddeus. Yes, it's about the federal site, and the Washington Post even cites an example of a young lady in West Virginia, 27 years old. She earns $22,000 a year. She thinks she's paying $100 a month more than she should, and her deductible is $4,000 too high. That's about a fifth of her income, and she was supposed to have surgery this month, so she needs obviously her health care to be in place, and they had no recourse for her other than to say, pay the premium now, appeal later when we're able to do that. When she said, when can we do that, she was told, we have no idea.
Lara, I come to you on this because I'm spending a lot of time reading about Woodrow Wilson, okay? The 100 years ago. It should be another time, another space. However, you can identify when you're 100 years later an issue that's so large that it's going to dominate everything, that this going into committee rooms and arguing over policy or arguing over dollars is all just sand going to be washed away by the ocean of this large thing. Affordable Care Act looks like that to me, Lara. Nobody can do anything about it. Everybody's going to be a victim at some point of this wave that's going to hit Washington, and they all must feel it.
Well, I think you're absolutely right that there are sort of mounting problems that keep being revealed the further and further into the program that we get. And while aspects may get solved, it appears to be sort of whack-a-mole where another one pops up. And I would imagine that there are going to be possible solutions, but the solutions are going to be a long time coming, and probably at least an election or two later before we actually see some resolution to this, as you said, sort of tidal wave that is washing in.
And it's not just party. Thaddeus, I appeal to you on this because both parties are participating in the idea that Washington is competent enough to federalize health care, or federalize our paychecks, or federalize our work hours, or federalize minimum wage. Both parties participate in this argument, and the American people have reason right now to just turn away and say you can't do anything.
Yes, that's true, but someone has to get elected, be it a Republican or a Democrat, depending on the district. What you're going to see over time, especially as you go into the presidential election of 2016, the public is going to be very keenly aware of candidates who put forward actual, practical, common sense solutions to fixing the problems that Obamacare has brought. Otherwise, you'll see this in 14, you'll see the same thing in 16. The Obamacare issue is much like the Blob heading towards the Capitol, except instead of Steve McQueen, you got Boehner doing his Dean Martin impersonation.
Francis, one more detail. We talked about healthcare.gov, the national site, the federal site, but you have a report on Maryland where this is a state that is understood as extremely Obama-friendly, correct? Extremely Democratic-friendly, and there's no transparency with regard to its own website. Is that it?
That's it. Maryland is about as blue as you get, right up there with Massachusetts and some of the other New England states that are, and California even. The issue here is one of ambition. Governor O'Malley is making no bones about the fact he wants to run for president in 2016. The Lieutenant Governor, Anthony Brown, wants to take Governor O'Malley's job in the coming election. He's running for governor right now. And he has been the governor's lead on the Maryland website, which has done what a lot of other state exchange sites have done, which is implode. There is a move afoot in the Maryland legislature to audit the website. The Maryland legislature is overwhelmingly Democratic. There are some Democrats who want this done now. The state law calls for an audit this summer. And so what Lieutenant Governor Brown is saying and his advocates are saying is, well, let's just wait and get everybody covered by the March 31st deadline, and then we'll worry about the audit when the audit comes this summer. There is another group of legislators saying, no, we don't have time to wait. Coincidentally, one of those who's saying we don't have time to wait is a member of the legislature who happens to be running for governor for the Democratic nomination against Lieutenant Governor Brown. So there's a real spider web of who's running for what and how does it impact the politics of Maryland's website.
Lara, this goes to the point that the Affordable Care Act is a failure that can bring down not only national politicians, but state politicians. So they have reason to be on their best behavior as well.
Well, I think that's exactly right. And let me just say that as we turn toward 2016, the only choice that voters have is to basically look outside of Washington for the solution. And unfortunately, that may not solve the problem, because then you have people who come here who know even less about the process than the people who already are here. But needless to say, that search for the outsider, that search for, if you will, the silver bullet, really will be something that I think draws people again in 2016, and there will be a renewed sense of hope and change from somewhere.
Lara Brown of George Washington University, Francis Rose. I thank them both at Federal News Radio, In Depth with Francis Rose each afternoon, and Thaddeus McCotter, my colleague and co-host at WJR, the great voice of the Great Lakes. I'm John Batchelor.